Welcome to Mad Men, where we gather in the creative lounge to discuss and analyze each and every episode of the AMC series Mad Men, which aired between 2007 and 2015. One of us is a first-time watcher of the show. One of us went through it just once, back when it was airing. And then there's me, who rewatches it so often, people in the office seem concerned that I'm pouring out episodes so early. I'm John Negroni, and Will Ashton, I'm happy to see you're wearing that dress I like, the one with the bow on the back that makes you look like a present.
Ho, 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 Merry Christmas.
In January, which is when we're recording this. And
I believe there's a bit of a mix-up here, because I think there are two Santa Clauses.
That's right, Mike Overholz, can't forget about you dressed up as Santa, but sorry, I'm not interested in a carton of cigarettes, thanks.
Ho, 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 have some luck, John.
That was so loud, it literally made like all the audio crack in my side.
Hello, Santa. I'm Santa.
Give me another go. Ready?
Right.
Whoa, ho, ho. Is this working?
Honestly, it's the three of us, three hoes, so I think that's apt. Let's talk about another episode of Mad Men. That's what we do here on the show. We're going to talk about Christmas Comes But Once a Year. And again, we're recording this not during Christmas, but after. But that's fine. That's fine. We've been right on this like calendar before, and it can't work out every time, I guess.
Nothing will ever be better than the day we recorded, and it was actually November 22nd, 1963, and JFK was shot.
Yeah, that was a weird one, but we got back to the present somehow. Ben, you know what? You guys are my present. Okay, so Christmas Comes But Once a Year. This is episode 2 of season 4, the 41st episode overall of the show. And for this one, we have Michael Uppendahl directing the episode. He's directed plenty times before. This is the episode that, by the way, brings back Freddie Rumsen, and fun little bit of early trivia. Michael Uppendahl directed his last episode, 6 Month Leave. So here he is back again. For the writers, we have Tracy McMillan and Matt Weiner, of course. And Tracy McMillan, I don't know if they've ever written an episode before. So I'm going to fact check that real quick. And they have not. And this is their only episode that they ever wrote or co-wrote on the show. So enjoy it while it lasts. This episode first aired on August 1st, 2010. And as I kind of alluded to in the last episode, the ratings are like the ratings average a lot higher than last season. We are in like the 2 millions pretty firmly. And this is a bit of a dip from last week. Last week was 2.92. This is 2.47, but still, if 2.47 would be the second highest rating of all of season 3. So there you go. Even higher than the season 3 finale. So yeah, let's talk about this episode. And I think that, Will Ashton, as somebody who enjoys the holidays and I think you enjoy Mad Men. We've had a few Mad Men holiday episodes at this point. How does this one compare for you?
Oh, who is Will Ashton?
Okay.
This is still Santa Claus. Ho, 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 ho.
Just get it out of your system and do what you
I'm
gotta
committing to this for the whole episode.
Which will make people turn the episode off.
Oh,
I can hear them navigating to the...
I can't believe that someone would turn a podcast off with Santa Claus.
I was against this at first, but I'm on board. Fucking go for it.
If you're going to be Santa Claus, are you going to explain the relationship between Santa Claus and advertising, which, of course, is a very not pernicious, I shouldn't say that. There are two things that go together like Coca-Cola and Christmas.
Oh, I do love Coca-Cola. Almost as much as I love cookies and Christmas.
I was at a coffee shop around the holidays, and the coffee stand we go to always has trivia for a free treat. And one of them was, what was the first brand to use Santa Claus in an ad campaign? You bet your ass I got that shit right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, what people might not all know, and I like that Mad Men doesn't kind of lay it on thick, but Santa Claus was basically not invented by Coca-Cola, but I mean, our modern / 20th century understanding of a guy in a red suit and giving the gifts, that's Coca-Cola. I mean, the ads and stuff that they did And, even the Santa Claus we see in this episode, like the version of him is very much like a result of that. And so keep that in your back pocket, Will Ashton, you first time watcher. It won't be the last time we see some cultural Santa stuff or Coca-Cola stuff in the show.
I didn't know who you were talking to at first, but then you said Santa.
I hate my life. I just kind of want to, just go home and, drunk, of course. And
well, it appears that there's a bit of a divide here. There's one naughty boy who doesn't want me to continue this bit, and one good boy who does. So what's
Santa? I love you.
So what am I to do here?
Can I ask? I know, this is a holiday episode, so I feel like we should have one holiday question.
Oh,
if you could take any Santa Claus, who would you want to actually turn into the real Santa Claus? For example, I would choose Paul Giamatti from Fred Claus.
That's a good choice. I would pick Tim Allen because he will kill me and have to live out my reign.
Wow, that was like surprisingly dark. For me, it's Ernest, for sure.
Ernest was never Christmas or Santa.
No, but I want him to be Santa.
Someone needs.
Question.
Wait, didn't he wear the suit and stuff though?
He wasn't Santa, I believe.
Well, that's not fair. Fine, the guy from Klaus. Or Klaus.
Oh, yes, an underrated film about my origin story.
Yeah, if he was like the real Santa and like all that, like the world would probably be a better place. I think.
I have a soft spot for the one where I conquer the Martians.
Okay, so Mike Overholtz, since Will Ashton / Santa Claus isn't willing to cooperate. What about you? I mean, I know you certainly have seen these episodes before. Christmas comes but once a year. Do you have a take? Do you have a hot take on this one?
I mean, it's of all the holiday episodes we get, it has to be, if not one of the most uncomfortable holiday episodes we get. It's not a fun time. It's like
it's a cringy episode.
Absolutely, it is. From Lee Gardner Jr. to Don's secretary to that neighbor who clearly fucking wants it, dude. Like it's a tough watch. Also, if you're gonna refer to Santa by his name, can you please refer to me by my podcast name for this episode? Thank you very much.
So the listeners can't see, of course, but it's Mike comes but once a night, which it sounds like a plea for help. Like you want to come more times.
Very naughty, but also very good.
Wow. That doesn't sound like Santa to me. Does that nurse really want it, though? Because the commentaries I listen to have an alternate take. Maybe there's a little bit of like a different reading people can have, where the point of that character, the nurse character, is that she like essentially kind of realizes that he's drunk and too old for her, and is kind of like maybe season 1 Don, yeah. But this version of Don, who could regularly charm like young women, he's getting older. He's not as attractive, and he's also, we were kind of talking about this last week, he's not as desirable. I remember we talked about this a bit of like, married men and like, women who go after them. And I've been thinking about it more, and especially after this episode, I know it's like the obvious answer of like, people want what they can't have. People want people who kind of have their lives together versus like, if somebody who's divorced and in the state that Don is in, it looks like their life isn't together. Like, oh, he made a mistake. Like, I don't want to have to like insert myself into that life. That's like a sad, everybody's like looking down on Don Draper right now. So that's kind of my belated addition to that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I don't know. It's the married thing is nice just because it has a built-in end to it, right? It's the easiest way to have no strings attached, but also like, speaking of the 60s, some mutually assured destruction if anyone ever tries to actually, tell and ruin your life. You both kind of caught in it.
That still happens. I mean, cheating is like very, very persistent and common in just the world. Like, it's just such a common thing. And there's so much psychology behind it. Speaking of psychology, we have some new researchers. Other person on this call who will probably get mad if I call them by their real name. We have some new characters in this. We have, I remember I messaged you as I was finishing my first rewatch of this. Like, oh boy, this is going to be a tough episode for you, I think, because of your your previous hangups with certain characters like Sally Draper, who is kind of maybe going for the bad boys right now.
Oh, what a naughty little girl, Sally. I can't believe she even got presents. Much of an oversight.
Is that it?
Oh, hey, John. Hey, it's me. Hey, all right, I'm going to be real with you. I'm also on the call with Santa Claus, so if
you've just been avoiding us and not answering our questions, how naughty.
I was going to come on after Santa did his spiel, but then, it just seemed like he was so into it. Yes, I am. I've never been on a podcast before. This is so much fun.
I feel like Santa's been on a podcast. Probably something like random, like Freakonomics.
Well, I must say, I was once invited on a certain podcast called The Joe Rogan Experience, but I feel it might alienate my brand a little bit. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, if it was before 2019, it was probably fine.
Ooh, I don't know, Jonathan. He says some quite edgy things.
All right, well,
he actually went on to Red Scare, but it's because he thought it was about like his suits.
Yeah. John, I don't want my suits to be scary anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if Santa doesn't mind, I can share my thoughts on. So you were asking about Sally Draper, I believe.
Well, I mean, we could go back to the original question. Which was,
what was the original question?
Thought of the episode.
I just kind of went into the other room when Santa was doing his spiel, so I must have missed the beginning of this episode.
We were talking about, I can't believe I'm holiday episodes in Mad Men, and what you think of this one compared to previous holiday episodes.
Oh, I think I think I've ever heard Mike say this one's a little bit sadder and darker than some of the previous ones, and I have to agree. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I knew that Don was not going to be in a great place, and throughout this episode, he only seems more sober and more emotionally secure as things go on. So obviously, I knew he was going to make a bunch of good decisions and things that he was not going to regret later on. But yeah, I mean, just the pain of watching Roger have to kind of bend over and appease Lucky Strikes and later put on that suit is just, yeah, it's pretty devastating stuff. And you kind of keep waiting for that moment where he like snaps or like, I don't know, punches Lee or something. But no, he's too obviously committed and too professional to do that. But you can just see the pain in his eyes in a way that I feel like even when he was near death, we haven't really seen from the guy before. So, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely something I wanted to bring up that should kind of be in our heads. Matthew Weiner, when he's talking to Michael Uppendahl in the commentaries, he's talking about how this whole episode is really about the gifts that people give each other. There's gifts all over this episode, makes sense because of the Christmas angle, but kind of alluding to what you're talking about there, Will, is the way that we have gifts going back and forth between these characters and, just like the underlying subtext of each and everything. There's the whole thing with like Faye Miller kind of talking about the themes out loud in terms of like what something actually means when you say something, which is very Mad Men, right? It's like, oh, if you say this, you're saying it about yourself, or, the psychology or the marketplace psychology of advertising and how that's going to play into, the 60s and Madison Avenue and all that good stuff. And yeah, also this episode, lots of desperate relationships and romances happening here. I pointed out 4. I don't know if I'm missing any. So we have kind of Dawn and Allison, but also like Allison / the nurse / Faye. You have Peggy and Mark, of course. You have Sally and Glenn, and then you have Roger and Joan. And so you all 4 of these kind of like dynamics are very much of like these characters giving something to each other. But yeah, did I miss anybody?
Yeah, you missed Pete in New York City.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Pete does not want to go to the Bahamas or wherever. Wait, I love the delivery of the line from Trudy too. She's like, and that's that. Like we're going to. I was like, okay, Alison Brie. She's having fun with it. But yeah, that's kind of I think what's setting up the episode. But what else did you guys kind of point out in this one, or what else kind of like stood out to you in terms of what this episode accomplishes? It's an episode 2. Weiner has said that episode 2s are really tough. You're still kind of like getting people acclimated to the new normal. For example, seeing Bobby Draper and like Henry kind of have like Henry kind of brings him in that first scene at the Christmas tree farm and like brings him in and it's like, like we kind of skipped over like Henry meeting the kids and all that stuff. And so we're just kind of diving into what happens next.
I do like narratively that it covers Christmas next, because I think this is the season of Divorce Dawn, right? So you got intro to Divorce Dawn, and then it's just like, it feels like what's one of the biggest divorce holiday? It's Christmas, right? So we're going just right for it in understanding where this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love, I was going to bring that up, John, before you touched on it, that you do skip over Henry meeting the kids, because I just feel like that's what mixed families are. And even back then, where it's like, you didn't totally explain to the kids. You just kind of dived in and it was like, this is your new normal. And especially from a kid's perspective, that's how fast it can feel and much of a whirlwind it is, where all of a sudden daddy's not here and we have a new one who's in the same house as us. So I really like how it's set up.
Like how Glenn was like, oh, you have I saw your new dad. My mom said that would happen. Brutal. Yeah, Return of Glenn Bishop. We'll get to him later.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about Glenn now or if you wanted to wait, but I can wait.
Yeah, well, I think you had something you wanted to say too about the Christmas stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I have too much to say about the Christmas that Mike didn't already say, but yeah, I mean, it is very poignant that Dawn, I think midway through the episode, is just like, I don't hate Christmas, I hate this Christmas. Mm-hmm. And just like, yeah, I mean, even though I don't recall Dawn being a very active presence for other Christmases where he was actually married with his kids, just the inherent nostalgia, I think that most, divorced dads have, where it's just like, he doesn't appreciate what he has until he's gone. And just knowing that, hearing that letter from Sally, dictating to Santa, i.e. her dad, really just seems to run home this loss of his. And I feel like, even though I think it really did hit with Thanksgiving, it's hitting harder with Christmas. And yeah, I mean, obviously he's in an emotionally vulnerable place. And when his secretary is kind of serving the wife/mom position of buying presents, I just kind of figured something was not gonna go great.
Yeah, Weiner has said some interesting stuff. He said about that scene where, Allison reads the letter to Dawn. He said that this to me is one of the saddest scenes, like not just in the episode, but in the whole show up to like through this season. And he said that Maria and Andre Jacquemin, who've written a lot, said that they talked early on with the character about how Allison is Dawn's work wife. And, she's kind of insinuated herself into his life. And when you watch this scene and she's like reading it out loud, you just see this like horrible sadness that passes between them as she's reading what Sally wrote. And so Weiner claims that for all of his faults, like Dawn has probably been there for most Christmas mornings. Like that's his, kind of interpretation of the character. And he's also kind of said that, he hates this Christmas. He usually loves Christmas, and that's why it's so tough. And you can read into that because, it's just weird. It's a weird thing when like being alone for the holidays. I was alone for New Year's this year, which is very, very sad. I got COVID in Thailand, so I couldn't be around anybody. And so I was by myself New Year's Eve. It was horrible. Like that, like I've felt a lot of sadness in my life, but like that was one of like the most brutal bouts of sadness I felt in a long time because I was in a totally different time zone. Other like people I know back home weren't awake. It was bad. It was pretty bad.
I will say that COVID in Thailand sounds like a really bad Paul Simon song.
It's also just bad in general. Yeah.
I was going to say, I do feel bad for you, John, but I do just imagine you sitting there trying to write a song about your experience.
No, but you know what the worst part of it was? Probably the worst part of it is, so it was a really bad strain. So I was literally like, I couldn't use screens for a big chunk of that experience. So like, I was just like by myself, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at a screen, just agony for hours. And on a holiday, yeah, it was not great. But we can talk about Glenn Bishop. He kind of opens the episode here. It's the return of Glenn. We haven't seen him since, I think the last time, unless I'm forgetting, was when he ran away and he was like hiding in the playhouse. Unless there was another time, like maybe in season 3 that I'm forgetting, and I can fact check that. But he's here yet again. Thoughts on Glenn Bishop, Matthew Weiner's son, who we haven't seen in a while. And I think there's kind of something interesting to his performance in this episode, but there's some people who might disagree about his acting. I don't know. We'll start with you, Mike, because I think you have a take on this.
I like to imagine that he was living in one of the trees and they got cut down, and so he just like came to the farm with it.
That's how he got the job. That whole line delivery of like, I get to cut it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid is like a serial killer in the making.
Yeah, I think there's like there's this line of like child actor to like prepubescent teenage actor where it's like certain line deliveries, like on the scale of like very cute, you're young, and then you grow older and you actually like it just doesn't work anymore. And some actors make that leap, and poor guy, I don't think he does. But I think Santa actually had a lot to say about it.
Oh, I don't mean to disparage this kid. He is actually on my nice list, believe it or not, as opposed to one Sally Draper. But yes, I have to admit that, I'm fairly new to the show, I must admit. I actually first watched this episode. This is my introduction to Mad Men. Because I heard Santa was in it, and I was like, oh, let's see what I'm up to. But yeah, I was a little confused by this opening scene because, I see these two kind of stilted characters just kind of talking about trees and dads and stuff. And I'm like, is this what it's about? Selling trees? Is this the Mad Men? These are children.
Yes. So Weiner has said that he likes trying to find ways to write kids that's believable. He claims like there's a rhythm to how kids talk, and it can be really hard to pull off. And it's just kind of funny because like as he's talking about this, Michael Uppendahl is kind of low key criticizing his son's acting. He's just like, there's kind of a deadpan quality to it, but it's good. And it's a little bit like, yeah, dude, he's a boss.
Yeah, if I may interject, I apologize, Santa, but yeah, I was gonna say that I mean, this is a kid. I don't want to disparage him, as well. But I did kind of get the vibe when I was watching the scene. Like, did he forget how to act between seasons? Because I just remember him being, not like an amazing actor, but like I think about that scene between January Jones and him in the car, and he's like carrying his own, and this scene is just, no pun intended, kind of wooden, and like he's, like Mike saying, like not really selling the lines, and like I get that he's supposed to be a weirdo kid, but yeah, it just doesn't quite work for me. Like this is a rare Mad Men scene where I'm just like, this is kind of bad. I don't know.
I did confirm, by the way, that
sorry,
just real quick, his last episode was The Inheritance in season 2 when he ran away and he got found out. So yeah, sorry, Mike.
No, I was just gonna say, I think a tough part of it too is like. Kiernan Shipka is, I think, turning in really great performance in the same scene. I totally believe her is this like not happy-go-lucky, but like doesn't understand the world and just like is accepting all information coming into her kind of type kid in Sally, where she's just like, I don't know. I just think it's really good.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage Karen Shipka, who I think is good, and I don't mean to, knock her in the same scene, but yeah, I think he kind of carries down the scene, but she does her best to salvage it, I think.
Yeah, so the actor who plays Glenn Bishop is Martin Holden Weiner, and he's an adult now. So we should point out. So like, I don't know if it's like messed up to criticize his acting from when he was a kid. I don't think he still acts. I don't think he still does anything, as far as I'm aware. But I did just notice. No, I don't know if I knew this already, but Matt Weiner did get divorced from his wife in 2019, so about 4 years ago. But anyway, that's not relevant to this. Yeah, Glenn Bishop, he's back in the show, and there's something going on between him and Sally. And Will, I just kind of want to get your read on where do you think that is going? Like the nature of what's going on between the two of them, because you can read it a few different ways. I think there's an obvious one, and I don't know what was going through your head when you kind of saw these characters. Because before Glenn, it was Glenn and Betty, right? Constantly interacting. And Sally was always kind of in the background of those scenes, if that. So yeah, what do you think?
I mean, there is something to be said about like children of divorce, especially this early on, are kind of prone to act out to get attention from their parents or adult figures in a way that, especially with Sally really desiring to have a father figure or her dad back in her life. there could be something to, if the house is in true disarray and like Glenn can't really, I don't know, in her, I guess maybe her mind, if Glenn can't handle it and leaves, that she feels like maybe the family will get back together and everything will, be normal. And then there's also the sense that, like, well, she is, a teenage girl, and obviously she's mature beyond her. Oh, wait, sorry.
She's about 10, 11 years old right now.
All right, fair enough. I meant to say preteen, but yeah, that's still kind of early for that as well. But no, but I mean, she's, she's at the age where, there could be some maybe attraction to Glenn. I don't really know. I feel it's a little bit more psychological than purely emotional. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think that's where it's going, but it could be very well. I have no idea, but I think it's more just her kind of desiring any sort of actual attention that she can get in a way that, is not, just being yelled at or being looked down upon. And, the fact that Dawn's on her life, and Dawn was the one that was really, from her eyes, supportive. And even though he was away at work all the time, like, she had what seemed to be like a pretty nice relationship with him. And now he's gone, she kind of has an absence in her life that needs filled in some way or another.
I think that's pretty close to what Weiner said. Mike, I want to get your take on Miner's take on this. So Weiner said, he says, I like how she is, like how Sally is, like talking to Glenn. He says that this is like in relation to when they're on the phone call. And he says, like, there's something about Glenn that people find threatening and scary, but to me, he's Sally's spirit guide. He's the only other divorced kid. And then Michael Uppendahl kind of says, like, he's this kind of authority. And I think that we'll kind of like cover that too. What do you think of that, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think it's totally true. That's what I was kind of alluding to when I said, what's the phrase I used, that Sally's just like looking for information and taking it in from the world. And, I think when you're that age, like, you're kind of like trying to like replicate the world you see around you. Like, you want to feel like you're older, especially if you're going through like divorce in your family. I don't know, I feel like it matures you or makes you grow up a little bit quicker. And people are probably still treating Sally like a little kid, and Glenn's the only person who's like actually telling her like it is. But I love that relationship because, when I was a kid, I felt like I was getting all this advice from older kids, and it was always, looking back on it, horrible advice or just like wrong in general. But you don't know that when you're a kid. You just take it and you're like, yep, for sure. And
it's not a dynamic we get to see in a lot of. Yeah, sorry. It's not a dynamic we get to see a lot in TV shows, right? Of like kids mentoring each other in this kind of way.
Yeah, you could call it mentoring. I like that, even though it's like,
it's messed up, but it's like, yeah, you can have a bad mentor. I worry for Will, because I think, Weiner even calls Glenn Bishop in this a bit of a bad boy. He has a bit of bravado, and Will, I know you're scared for Sally's future. You want her to do right by the law, and with this influence.
I mean, you would hope at a time like this, where she's also in a kind of emotionally vulnerable place, that she would do right, start to fly straight, kind of
go to church
in her ways. But
Carla,
yeah, I mean, that would be ideal. Yes, to find Jesus, or maybe Santa Claus. Oh, but yes, I do think she's going to be on the naughty list for a long, long time.
I do. I really like how this show really shows us how a kid loses their innocence in terms of like growing up. It's something that is really hard to do. And I think Kiernan Shipka got a lot of attention for her performance on this show for that very reason. Watching her from season 1 to this point where we have kind of two crucial ingredients to like watching this kid growing up before our eyes, and where, even a little thing like the letter to her father, and how it's like, it's still a kid, right? She's not suddenly like talking like Emily Dickinson, but she is literally like, misspelling the word ruse. Like, she's still a kid, but she is like quickly figuring out the world isn't what she thought. And she's quickly, we saw hints of it too in the last episode, and we talked about that. Yeah, I think that the way this show handles Sally Draper, it's one of those things where you can kind of tell they kind of made it up as they went along, especially at this point, because they kind of realized the talent they have with Shipka. And so something to keep in mind. I want to talk real quick about the new office again. And first of all, I just love it and how it compares to the old one. There's something in the commentaries they bring up about how bright this office is, like when you have like the winter light and everything. And it's just, and also like Roger's like painting he has, and it's just like it's so 1960s. And yeah, I just wanted to call that out, that I think that like I'm just so glad. I know we already said it before, but like I'm so glad they switched up the offices, because it makes the show feel like it completely got refreshed. It feels like brand new. Like we're kind of ending Christmas and we're going into the new year, and you feel that. Like you feel like you are already like in this new season. I love it.
It looks like an Italian hospital in here.
The costumes, Janie Bryant, costume designer. I mean, that Christmas party, I just love how their clothes are also evolving with the times. And like literally like Pete's like red kind of blazer. And like, I love like Allison's like outfits. There was something that, cause I also listened to the commentary with Alexa Alamani, who plays Allison. And she was on the commentary with Joel Murray. And yes, we're going to talk about Freddie coming back to the show. But she kind of mentions that she's like, I kind of find it interesting that both Sally Draper and Allison both wear a lot of plaid in this episode. And I think she was like kind of maybe implying if there was this weird sort of like childlike quality to Allison, this innocence to Allison, that is what makes Dawn ultimately not really attracted to her. And it's something that like maybe the costumes are part of that. I thought it was an interesting kind of read on it that I hadn't really considered. I also didn't fact check it. I didn't watch the episode again to see if there were other people wearing plaid that I didn't notice, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I will say, I read on the Amazon thing that apparently this episode won Emmy for the hairstyling and makeup.
Allison's hair. Fantastic.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, because it's like, I think what's great about the show is it's one thing to mimic the hairstyles of the 1960s. It's another thing to allow that to like not intrude the story, to add to the immersion, and also to be really discerning of who does what, like who has what kind of style in this show. The slow evolution of Peggy's style is very deliberate. It's not just like 1960 and all of a sudden everybody looks like Jackie Kennedy. And, there's like little touches of like Joan wears that dress for a reason because Roger kind of asked her to. It feels like a throwaway thing, but it adds overall to the flavor of the show. The way that Allison dresses, the way her hair is, Peggy could never look like that in terms of like wearing that kind of thing. It just wouldn't match her. And so that's why I think that like the show constantly gets praised for its props, for its costumes and hair and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the dress goes, I did want to mention, like when I was reading the Mad Men carousel, they had kind of a negative connotation as far as like that Joan was also kind of going to the will of the client. But I mean, I thought, yeah, especially when I was watching the episode, I thought it was more that she was wearing that dress to appeal to Roger, not so much like, I mean, Roger obviously was pretending to be like, oh, wear it for, Lee, but like, obviously he's the one that wants it. And like,
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I know this whole episode's about compensations and like people sacrificing their integrity, but I don't know. I do think it's interesting that they're kind of building that spark up again between Joan and Roger, which makes me curious to see, now that they're working together in the office again, his sparks may fly once more.
Now I know why Mike was so uncomfortable when I gave him his Christmas bonus, the night after we slept together and all that. I was confused. I was like, oh, I thought you would be happy that I paid you for it, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I did appreciate you saying thank you for all the hard work.
Yeah, I was like, oh, he'll get the pun and everything. Let's talk about Freddie Rumsen. Our old pal is back in the show. Will, were you expecting Freddie to come back? Were you thrilled? Were you happy? What happened with your mind?
I was happy. Yeah, I figured this wasn't the end of Freddie Rumsen, but, I didn't know for sure. But yeah, it was nice to see him again. And, yeah, I mean, it's endearing to see that he's committed to staying sober. But yeah, there is a quality, I mean, especially with his kind of dynamic with Peggy that I felt was very poignant in the sense of like when you, I don't know, like for instance, if you, go to college after high school and like you don't see somebody for like 3 or 4 years and you see him again and like they're still the same person, but you've kind of evolved.
Yeah.
And like they'll like maybe like, say some crass joke or like something that, might have been funny to you in high school or something, but then like you go back and it's kind of like, oh, like it's not that they've become a worse person or anything, but you've just kind of evolved in different ways. And it's just like, oh, like the dynamic can never really be the same. And that's not to say that I think Peggy was happy with his sort of sexism and, his general misogyny, but there is something like now that she's a little bit more self-assertive and now that she's older and a little bit more confident in her capabilities, that she's less willing to deal with that. But also, I think having him be gone for a while did allow her to sort of romanticize him probably in her mind and maybe kind of forget about the negative qualities and only really remember like the good stuff. So like kind of getting that kind of washed over you is, I don't know, it's just kind of tragic in its own sort of way.
She doesn't know that he once likened her to a dog playing a piano. Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think that I also appreciate the way that they both adapt. And because there is a sentimentality there that does persist, even though they both have a bit of they have a conflict in this episode. But I don't know, it's a very Ted Lasso thing. They kind of just talk it out and they both kind of grow from the experience instead of using TV drama to kind of stretch it out, I guess. Because ultimately she comes to him for advice, and because she still relies on the guy and she doesn't allow, her new sort of, outlook of the world. She doesn't totally throw away, things that, she appreciates. She still respects and looks up to Freddie in a lot of ways, even though she's very conflicted about looking up to the guy. Because in some ways, small ways, she kind of sees herself as like, well, I'm better than I used to be. Like, I took his office, like all this stuff. But yeah, I think that it's a very intriguing dynamic because Freddie has also changed a lot. Like, yeah, he's the same person. You're right. Like in those scenes, especially, but the AA stuff, he's got it more under control, and he's a little bit more like temperate or temper. Is that the word? Tempered. He's a little bit more chill.
The word is boring. He is not a fucking fun time anymore.
Yeah, if you ask Don.
Sober people. I do love, though, that they have that moment, right, where they do talk it out, like that Ted Lasso. But the thing he leaves her with is, don't fuck him or he won't respect you. But also, don't lead him on because he'll get blue balls, and that's your job as a woman.
Yeah, it is weird advice. Because I think there's a kernel to his advice that Weiner says is there. So I'm curious, I'll look for it real quick. But yeah, there's something he says about this scene that is interesting. He says that part of his advice is that, like, don't let anyone force you to do anything, but also don't wait around forever. And so even though Freddie delivers that in a way that's very crass and disrespectful and misogynistic, there is this sort of like, shit or get off the pot kind of thing that he's saying there. It's like, if you don't want to do it, just don't. But also, like, if you're unsure, like, you do have to make a decision on like what you want.
I will say though, with Peggy's boyfriend, it does kind of remind me of the meme as far as like, like the one where it's like, oh, he's so cute versus human resources. Like, I get the vibe with like Dawn when he's horny in this episode. I'm like, oh, he's so cute. He just wants to get his rocks off. But when that guy's horny, I'm like, get away from that woman. Jeez Louise. Like,
yeah, Mark is
go
very
masturbate
hateable.
in the bathroom or something. Get off of her.
Yeah, we can move to him. Mark, he sucks like so much. I do like how, by the way, we get into Peggy's apartment. She still has JFK on the wall. We didn't mention it last episode because we saw her apartment last episode too. But yeah, I think we kind of just skip over the election of 1964, and that's another kind of nice thing is that we don't have another election episode or like season really. But yeah, LBJ beat Barry Goldwater in 1964 by a landslide. There you go. Moving on. But yeah, Mark, everybody hates him. Mike, I think you hate him even.
Oh, yeah, big time I hate Mark. Mark is just, he's like the worst kind of dude, right? Where it's like,
he acts like, nice, but he's predatory.
Exactly. He's just a skis, honestly. But like, wants to be a tough guy and like needs to assert himself over people he thinks are below him because he's being asserted over in his life. You have to assume all the time.
Right. So you get that sense with Peggy that he's trying to basically have that same macho quality with her that he can't have elsewhere because he looks down on her. Like, you can see he looks down on her. He doesn't really listen to her. He doesn't respect what she wants. And he's very pushy. And yeah, you just kind of see like it's good casting because like they pick somebody who's like the same height as her, but he doesn't see it that way. Like, he thinks that she's below him because he has this clear masculine insecurity of like other dudes like could like fold me in half basically. And yeah, no one likes Mark. It's kind of wild. I don't think he got any gifts for Christmas from Santa.
Oh, Yes, I can't say he was on the nice list, I have to admit.
Okay, so Don's drunkenness. Go ahead.
Oh,
What I love about Santa Claus right now is that like 80% of what you're saying is admitting things. I'm like, why do you think Santa is always admitting stuff?
well, what do you want me to talk about there, Michael? I thought we were talking about the episode.
I think it's because Santa's been in AA, so he's a bit more forthcoming, honestly.
Oh, you say that, but you know what they say about Santa's costume? There's always a bottle hidden inside.
Oh boy, good pull.
I didn't get to share my thoughts on the costume when you were talking about the costumes. I had to use the bathroom. I have to say I was a little disappointed by the Santa costume they have here at Sterling Cooper. Draper.
It was period accurate.
Maybe so, but I prefer a little more garnish to it. A little bit more pizzazz. It's just too flimsy, too worn out. I think whoever designed that costume should be on the naughty list.
Wow. Janie Bryan would probably agree with you there. But which, by the way, that reminds me when Freddie agrees to be Santa at first, but he leaves because of his fallout with Peggy, right? So that's what leads to Roger having to take on the costume. Super uncomfortable. But the whole thing where he's talking on the phone with Cal Rutledge. So speaking of like gifts that people give each other, like Freddie comes in with a gift to the agency. He's just kind of a standout guy. You have the whole thing where he's like, I don't want Pete Campbell around this. So you kind of have a little bit of a payoff from he sees Pete as the guy who got him fired. No mention of Duck, by the way. But yeah, the whole thing where he brings in Pons and Cal Rutledge was somebody he knows from AA. When he's on the phone call and the commentaries, they kind of say it has like a Bob Newhart quality to it, which I think was kind of funny. When you rewatch the episode, it's like, oh yeah, it kind of, it's very funny in that way, but also sad, which just sums up the episode. But also, he mentions that he's going to go meet Cal at a church, a very specific church, to go talk to him. And that actually is, Joel Murray was told like, oh yeah, that's a real like AA place at the time. And I think even still today, it's like, dang, those details, like they always just find a way to like squeeze them in, which I appreciate. Oh yeah, I was going to bring up Don's drunkenness. So Don's a bit of a drunk. I think it's interesting you bring Freddie into this episode. I know. But like the whole thing where you kind of see like when he meets up with Freddie, he kind of, he tries to offer him a drink, and even Roger's kind of like, isn't it a little early for that? And Don just doesn't, but we're out this episode. The guy's just getting, I think in Mad Men Carousel, he's gone from like a sort of functioning alcoholic to a non-functioning one at this point. And I think that just adds to how uncomfortable the episode is, because you don't want to see Don getting shut down all the time and not being able to function, but also he's a bad person. So at the same time, you're kind of like, he deserves this. It's really weird.
I mean, it is also poignant because, like in the last episode, we see him trying to like kind of control his narrative and maybe assert himself in new ways. And this is not only him kind of going back to his old ways, but kind of, being burdened and kind of tangled by his vices and his failures at this point. And yeah, I mean, we don't even know how that article turned out. But yeah, it's definitely not a fun time to be Don Draper.
Yeah, we have the highs and lows of Don Draper, right? You have an episode that ends with a high for him of like, oh, he's on the upswing. But then, yeah, we get into a few weeks later, and as this show does, like the whole thing with him and Peggy, I guess, is kind of cleared up, and he's just back at work, and he's just still doing his thing. Yeah. I mentioned these characters before, Faye Miller, and who is played by Cara Bueno, I forget how to say her name. But she, of course, a lot of people recognize her from Stranger Things. Probably one of the biggest things that she's been a part of. She plays the mom in Stranger Things of the main guy, the Finn Wolfhard character. I forget their names at this point, but yeah, her. But she was also in The Sopranos, which, Matthew Weiner worked with her because she plays a certain character related to Christopher. So I don't give anything away with The Sopranos.
Oh, is that who she was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I saw in the
different hair color.
Yeah. I saw in Mad Men Carousel that, she was credited for Sopranos, but I couldn't figure out which character. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is, her kind of introduction here as a researcher, as somebody who, we've seen researchers in the show before, but she's kind of a psychologist / researcher, and she gets a lot of airtime here, just kind of like on that couch at that one point between Burt Cooper and Dr. Atherton, who are kind of like debating about like how conservative Ayn Rand they can be. But also, she has a whole thing with Don, and where she like stands up to him, and it's just kind of like, you didn't take my presentation. And I like how in Matt Zoller Seitz says in Carousel, he's like, maybe Don didn't do the thing because he can't remember like all the lies he's told about his childhood, so he's just like, pass. But of course, you can also believe that Don, he doesn't care.
Yeah, or I mean, I think he just still doesn't want to really confront his past because he's not really sure who he is at the present. So at this point, it's just, it just seems like more work than he's really emotionally capable of doing at this point.
For sure. I do like how Matthew Weiner kind of like, he was talking to Cara Bueno. I wish I knew how to say her name right, but he said that he thinks the character is from the Bronx, spent her whole life trying to get rid of her accent. And he says, like, I wanted this woman to feel like, a woman who could have this job at the time, like that confidence. He considers her she's a professional person. She's a know-it-all. She's probably frustrated in her life that not everyone is as smart as her. And so I find the character to be very refreshing, like the way that she talks to Don, like, because you have the nurse kind of shut down Don, but it's with pity. It's with a sort of like, ooh, gross, like, stranger danger. You're like 40 or almost, like, no thanks.
Well, I mean,
and also he reminds her of her dad, which
that's what I was going to say is that like she equates him to his dad. So
I mean, that can help.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're Allison, I guess. Yeah.
Ooh. But no, when Faye shuts him down, she does it like brutally, like psychologically. The way that he's just like, I thought you came here to flirt. And she kind of just like lays him out and it's just like, dude, like you are like desperate. Like, and it's sad. And like the way that like Joey kind of calls Don pathetic was like obviously pretty mean. But the way Faye handles him is like mean and almost like a productive way, because you can tell it messes with Don's head, where she's like, oh, people don't want to know that they're a type. And she has that great line. She's like, don't worry, you'll be married in a year, and she says it so confidently, so arrogantly, but it's like, it's so like Don hears that. He's like, whoa, like he doesn't want to get figured out. But like, she's kind of doing like what Glenn is doing with Sally, where he's just like, yeah, my mom would said that would happen. Probably going to have a kid soon. Like, there's a lot of bravado to it, but it comes from a place of like people who've seen the world and like, they're just kind of like, yeah, like Weiner said, like know it all. Love it. Do you like Faye Miller, Will Ashton? Are you a fan? Do you hope she comes back?
Yeah, I'd be excited to see her again, especially now that I know she's a Sopranos alum. But yeah, no, I mean, she seems like a fun character. I always like when someone can take Don the task, especially if that person is not Pete Campbell. So, yeah.
And I was going to bring it to Mike, but it looks like his microphone disappeared. So his audio might... now it's there.
Yeah, you can still hear me now.
Oh, okay. I was worried that it happened again. But yeah, Mike, yay or nay on Faye Miller? What do we think?
She's just here in one episode. I think she's fine, I guess. No, just kidding. I think what's fun is in these first two episodes as well, it's like, it's Don trying to get figured out or be figured out, which obviously he doesn't like, with the profile in the newspaper and now a psychologist telling him who he is. But it's interesting that like everyone in Don's life is trying to figure out who he is or tell him who he is. But this is a time in his life where he should be figuring out for himself. And he's just like absolutely avoiding it, which is like no surprise. But it's interesting to watch too, because as a viewer, I feel like defensive of Don. Like when Joey calls him pathetic, I'm like, you have no idea what he's going through, you jerk. But he really is pathetic.
Speaking of pathetic, I have a quick question about Peggy and Mark, actually, that sparks something. Why do you guys think that Peggy is kind of waiting with Mark? Like she doesn't want to have sex with him yet. I mean, me personally, I would be too. Like I'd be hesitant considering the dude himself. But yeah, this is, she dated Duck. Like she has, clearly she's been in sexual relationships before. She's had sex. But why do you think she sees it differently with this guy?
My guess is that it just hasn't worked out previously doing it her way. And so she's trying maybe listen, like maybe her mother's right and Catholicism is right and all these things. So let's just give it a go with a nice boy and do it like that.
What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly lend to the themes of the episode, especially in the sense of like after she kind of stood up for herself against Freddie, she eventually kind of compromises and claims that she's wrong or whatever, and tries to mend that relationship. And so, I mean, and maybe she's also kind of taking Dawn's advice, the idea of like, you can just kind of start over and be a different person if you want to be, and not like she's changed your identity and like moving to a different place or whatever, but she's kind of like, okay, I had my, flirty period, my period of being debaucherous, but maybe it is time for me to settle down and kind of figure out. Maybe she's seeing what Dawn's going through, and as well as some other folks in her office, and kind of realizing that maybe she should settle down so she's not going to become kind of sad and lonely and sort of pathetic as they are now. But maybe that's too thinking that her work life and home life are mended together.
Well done. Well, that's exactly what Matthew Weiner said. He literally used the words, she has to start over, and like she has to keep going. Like she just wants to kind of put all that stuff behind her. I think she's embarrassed that she was with Duck. We don't know why they broke up, but we can assume a lot of things. I mean, that relationship was doomed, but I think that she just is coming out of a relationship like that and being like, look at your life, look at your choices, like, and trying to figure out what went wrong. And being like, okay, here's a guy who just seems okay, but yeah, under the surface, of course, he's not. Oof. By the way, I do like that, he kind of brings up the Swedish Playboy article thing, and we get another kind of like thing where Peggy is Norwegian. And so like we had that whole thing with her roommate where like Norwegians and Swedish people kind of hate each other. That's like a whole thing. And so I like that the show kind of sprinkles that in, where she's like, you're never going to get me to do something Swedish people do. But anyway, just wanted to bring that up because I think it's funny. Should we talk about Dawn and Allison? Allison, who, it looks like in this episode kind of has this like flirtation thing going on with Joey, which Joey, by the way, this could just be me and maybe I'm out of line. Maybe I'm out of pocket. My gaydar goes off so high with Joey. So much so. And like we see him checking out Allison. I'm not saying that he's gay, but like, am I alone in this? Is my gaydar, like, is it on the fritz?
I mean, someone needs to fill Saul's position in the office, so, I
don't know.
Yeah, I'm not with you here, gotta say.
I'm by myself on this one? Well, fair enough. But yeah, he does like the little drawing for Allison. He kind of like checks her out like during the Christmas party. He plays the game with her. It's kind of setting up that like there's something going on there. But sure enough, we have the whole scene where Allison goes to Don's apartment to bring him his keys. The episode's sort of setting it up that like the person he's going to try to sleep with again is the nurse, but she's not there. And so instead, he puts the moves on Allison, Weiner or Uppendahl. One of them likens Don, or they were talking about John Slattery, who plays Roger, was shadowing for this scene. Like he's directed before. And he kind of like likened Don to like a Venus flytrap, the way he kind of like ensnares Allison. And it's such a terrible scene. Like I hate it so much because it's just, you don't want it to happen so badly because it's awful. Like what he's doing is awful, and what he's doing to her, and her kind of like her emotions in all of this. For me, it's kind of hard to read exactly what's going through her mind, but you can kind of see it. What do you guys think? Like clearly she had like a thing for him at one point, right? But like she kind of just got over it and is like just kind of sees him as her boss.
Yeah, it feels like the thing is like she just doesn't want to cross these moral lines in like multiple ways, right?
Yeah.
The professionalism line, the he's drunk line, the he's much older line, the he's divorced line. There's like this is just not a good situation for her in so many ways. But and then I do think then there's that like small part of her that all of us have, which is like, but I did at one point fantasize about this, and so okay, Eventually,
that's what Matthew Weiner said. He said that she at one point fantasized about him, but then put it away. Almost word for word.
Nothing, Will?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if there's more to say to that. I mean, yeah, it's a bummer, but it seemed kind of inevitable considering how the events were playing out. Should I ask Santa what he thinks about it?
Well, I'll just say, I think that it is interesting that they don't position her as somebody in a relationship. They position her as somebody, like, they said that when they have the whole scene where like Joey's flirting with her, the function of all that stuff is that she is single. They call her like somebody viable, that, you know, it's not like she's somebody that is married already, or there's some kind of, I think they wanted like the scandal of what happens there to be purely based on him taking advantage of her and her kind of being in a very difficult position. Because how do you know, when you're in that position and it's your boss, like there's a power imbalance there. And, you know, it's very, very unsavory. It's unethical. It's a lot. It's rape, basically. And it's sort of like, it's just such a murky thing in terms of like, what could she have done differently, you know? And like, she's ensnared, and it's just so gross. It's just so gross. And like, they make the scene gross, you know, like the way that their clothes are still on. And, you know, they say that like, of course, Dawn is going to smell terrible.
Yeah. I mean, especially because like, it's not even like softly lit or anything. It's like all dark hues, and like, it's not, you know, it's not like a sexy scene. It's just kind of,
Matthew Weiner called it a sexy scene.
Oh, really?
Which I was like, what? Because Michael Uppendahl was like, there's no romance to this. And he's like, yeah, there's no romance to it, but there's still something kind of sexy about it. And I wanted it to kind of be like, you know, based on like sex scenes from like the 1970s. I'm like, Matthew Weiner, what the fuck, dude? What? Sometimes I'm saying Weiner sometimes says things where I'm just like, dude, you are 58.
And then the red flags for all the allegations go off, and you're like, oh, got it.
Yeah, always got to point it out. But then Don brings Allison into his office and tries to avoid her, I guess, and talks to Roger. He just puts it off, I guess. It's kind of stupid, but he has to go to his office at some point, and it's just so awful, like what he says to her. Alexa Alamani in the commentary was just like, when I was watching this episode, or I was looking at the script, I was like, I thought of like 20 things that he could have said that would have been way better. But there is that moment where he pulls the money out of the drawer. So it's obvious that it was planned. He's not giving her a bonus because of, you know, but at the same time, it's just, in the last episode, he paid a sex worker. In this episode, he's treating Allison like a sex worker. It's unavoidable. And it's just so sad because Allison is so innocent in this. She did nothing wrong at all. Her expectation that there might be something more happening afterward completely gets just like taken away from her. And she's not even like, she's not acting off. Like she's being so gracious to this guy, being so generous to this guy. And for him to look her in the eye and just to pretend like it didn't happen. And the stuff he says to her, I hate it so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, in addition to like kind of feeling like he's paying her off, he's almost like paying for her discretion in a way.
Yeah.
Like obviously it's like you said, like she was going to give that bonus, but like it's more leaden now. Like there's a little bit more meaning to it in a way that just,
he's ashamed.
It's
of her, where she went into it being just like, wow, you know, like he cared for me, and yeah, it's terrible. But Mike, I know you're a big fan of this scene, and you're like, yeah, Don did this exactly right.
As someone who's married to a now former coworker, actually former insubordinate, yeah, I can do nothing but, you know, support this aspect. That's how I found love.
You think people marry their coworkers? I gotta say, like, I've never really had, like, I've definitely dated people that I used to work with, like a long time ago, though. Like, you know, when I was a lot younger, and it was like retail jobs. You know, it's like, oh, you see that person again after a while, but never like while I'm working with somebody. Like, I've always felt like I have to have a separation there because it's work, and I associate work with like that's that stuff. And yeah, I don't know, but I guess for some people, that's different.
To be clear, we started dating after we worked together, you son of a bitch.
Okay. Will, have you ever dated a coworker before?
Can't say I have.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody, but it's also, I don't know. To me, it just always seems like a bad idea. But also, I don't usually find myself in situations where I want to date coworkers. Like, you know, I'm speaking, of course, when I was single, and like, yeah, I worked in the same office for a long time, and like, I was single for a bunch of it, and yeah, I just never kind of, I don't know, it's like I'm too busy. Anyway.
Well, I must say, if you remember, I'm on the podcast that I am I'm married to Mrs. Cross, and we work together every year, and there's
runs the business?
Yeah, she wears the pants.
She's not stay at home mom. Okay.
She wears the pants in a relationship, I must say.
Let's finish out with anything trivia wise that I might have missed. There's not too much more. When I was listening to the commentary, there wasn't a lot of like trivia they got into until like toward the end of the episode. But there was some stuff. Matthew Weiner said that when you see Freddy like eating a sandwich and smoking the cigarette, he said Michael Appendahl was just like, yeah, people remember, like people used to do that a lot. Like that's a very like specific image. And Matthew Weiner said like, yeah, my mother did that. So he talked about how, his mother kind of inspired how he wanted that scene to go with him doing it. When we see Glenn doing the phone call at the top of the stairs, that's actually the Draper household set. They just repainted it and they added the decorations and stuff. So that's not Glenn's house. That's, he's in the house already. Which is kind of funny. Not too much else here. Oh yeah, the scene where the Drapers and Henry go back into the house after Glenn trashed it. They originally had, so there are two kind of like scenes that were written but never happened. I think this one actually was shot. But basically, there was a scene where you were going to see everybody getting ready to go see. Janie Bryant was told like the costumes should be like they're going out to the city to watch the Nutcracker. So that's how their costumes are kind of like centered. But they got rid of the scene where, kind of setting up that they were going to be out of the house when Glenn calls. There's another scene that was supposed to be written in where Dawn actually goes to the party that the nurse has in the building the night, like after the Christmas party. Or actually, no, not after the Christmas party. Sorry, before that, the day before, whatever it is. And there was a whole thing of it. They got rid of it for time and money because the conga line, which we didn't talk about, they wanted to do that last minute. And so they used the money that they would have done for the party scene. And I'm so glad they did because the conga line through Sterling Cooper is iconic. It's like one of the more iconic moments in the whole show. And we almost didn't even talk about it. But I love the conga line scene. And they were saying the way that they shot it was that everybody is kind of doing their own individual impression. He said, Michael Weiner said, we did that in 2 takes because we loved how everybody did it sloppy. Like it's messy and stuff. It's kind of improvised and they liked it that way. But that whole thing where they're in the background, you have the people making out and it's a payoff, to like Lee Garner Jr. being like, oh, I want to go to a Madison Avenue Christmas party. Sign me up. And it's like, that's kind of his expectation of it. Right.
Yeah, I'm all for shows having the whole cast do a conga line. I think that was something that was missing. I think that was something that was missing in The Sopranos, certainly, and I would have loved to have seen that in Breaking Bad and also in Fargo. Sure, yeah.
True Detective.
Last thing I have, each season of Fargo, that would be even better.
Yeah, there you go. Last thing I have is that Joel Murray believes that Freddie's wife actually left him months ago, and that we don't get to that storyline. But putting that in the ether, I won't confirm or deny it. Something that gets brought up or hinted at or anything like that later. But Joel Murray he just says that like that's kind of his understanding of the situation that Freddie is in the context of this episode. It's not to say that it is true, but And there you go. The episode ends with I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus. Fun choice because Bobby still believes in Santa, so you can kind of throw that in there. We have the first mention of the Beatles in the show. So Sally gets the Beatles 45s, which I think we're all fans of the Beatles. I love the Beatles. I don't know if we've really talked about the Beatles much. Huh?
I have a Beatles tattoo.
Great. Do you have Beatles 45s though? I know you have that locket with your initials, but
yeah, no 45s. I used to. Lost them in the divorce.
Well, are you more of a Bob Dylan fan?
Sure, yeah. I like the Beatles. Yeah.
Sure.
I thought you were going to do the Rolling Stones thing, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like people more liken Beatles versus Bob Dylan because there's more of a contrast. I feel like people look at Rolling Stone and Beatles and it's like, yeah, they're different. They're totally different sounds, but they're kind of in the same, you're a fan of this, you're a fan of that, like cousins, but anyway. Mm-hmm. That is Christmas Comes But Once a Year. Thanks so much for listening. Was there anything else you guys wanted to bring up before we say goodbye?
Oh, I just want to say like and subscribe for more content. Maybe can I come back for another episode?
Sure, Santa. We couldn't say no to you.
Santa, before we get off, would you mind commenting on the Israel-Palestine going on?
What do you want me to say about it?
I guess, whose side are you on specifically?
I'm on the side that is nice as opposed to naughty.
All right.
Which one is that?
Before that bomb goes off, see you all next time. Bye.
Oh.